Okay. Great. I'm going to open up the meeting of Tuesday, January 12th, 2021, meeting of the Cohasset Select Board meeting. Tonight's meeting, sorry about all the word meetings. Tonight's meeting will be conducted on the Zoom platform and live streamed on Cohasset 143 TV and on Cohasset's Facebook page. The public is invited to participate on the Zoom platform, which can be accessed using the link provided at the top of the posted agenda for tonight's meeting. Members of the board and other scheduled participants will be able to participate when called on by the chair. Board members will be able to ask questions of any participant. All votes taken at this meeting will be by roll call. Members of the public who wish to ask questions are asked to utilize the question and answer feature on Zoom, including typing in their name and address for the public record. The chair will review the questions and direct them to the appropriate participant for a response. This meeting is also being recorded and will be available for later viewing on Cohasset 143 TV. If you're following us on Facebook, the comments there are not monitored, and we encourage you, if you want to have a comment during the meeting, to participate using on Zoom. With that, I'll ask for a roll call vote to open the meeting, beginning with Jack.
Jack Creighton here.
Ray Evans here.
Diane Kennedy here.
Paul Schubert here.
Harry Thompson here.
Great. Our meeting's open, and our first item is public comment period. Carrie, do you want to monitor that?
Yep,
Looks
we
like
have
we have-
one comment from Sean Galvin from 143 Fort Hill Street in Hingham, asking, will Cohasset Road Race by the Sea take place in late March or April?
So we haven't had an application for that, and I don't know that we've had that discussion yet on the agenda, but we can certainly, once we know whether we're going to be discussing any future. My guess, Chris, do you know from the Rotary? I believe they're postponing it.
I believe they're, I'm not going to swear to this, but I believe they're trying to set it up on a virtual race.
Yep.
Because there's no expectation that they're going to be able to run a race in March. It's just not.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And that reminds me, and we're going to jump into our usual update from our emergency management crew on pandemic issues and matters. Chris, can you remind me if you remember what we did about public events, like what we kind of suspended hearing applications for public events through? Did we do it just, or did we set a date? That's all right. That's something we can follow up on, Corey, unless you remember.
Yeah, the new system is we would hear we take applications for public events
As
if they
they came
ran
in.
through public health first. That's the hurdle to
Thank
use
you.
a running reference.
That's what I do remember now.
And that's how we did. That's how we did the church fairs and stuff. And there's been no other applications to my knowledge for any at this point.
Okay. Any other public comment? Doesn't look that way. So I'm going to segue us into our community update. We put generally we get at this time in the meeting an update on COVID and how everything's working in town, and also the the rate of infection, et cetera, et cetera. We also, because I think many of us have been getting a lot of phone calls about vaccines, I asked Pam to, and anybody else who's going to join in and tag team with her, to kind of update the community more than anything on what the vaccine plan is in general. And most of that is being directed by the state. I will turn the mic over to whomever is speaking first. Welcome everybody, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. We're in calendar year 2 of this thing. What's the count up to now, Glenn?
297
days.
97th day. Just a comparatively quick update tonight, and I think you're going to start, Pam, and I have the PowerPoint. Tell me when
Yep.
you're.
I'm all set. Thanks, Chris. So I thought I'd just start off to show, how our cases have looked since the first case came in early March. So it's pretty much mirrored the rest of the country, actually, where we kind of had this uptick in the spring, and then it really tailed off in the summertime and then is ramped up in the fall. And you can see like we doubled from November to December. And then that number 42 as of today in January actually is now 43. I just saw a case come in. So we're not even quite halfway through January, and you know, we're well on our way to doing as many, if not more cases in December. So we're full on surge right now, which is pretty much what everybody was kind of predicting in the beginning that would happen, that, you know, January and February could be really rough. And that's what we're seeing. So next slide. Thank you. So like Diane was saying, it's really kind of the state that's dictating the order of priority of who gets the vaccine and when. And they're actually kind of limited by, you know, what they can get from the manufacturers and the production. And so luckily there was some news today that maybe more is going to be released to the states sooner, which would be really great. So, you know, we're starting off in phase 1, and that goes from December through February. And then phase 2 is when most people in this town are probably going to get their vaccines. Well, not most people, but I would say the people that are calling the most are going to get their vaccines. It's individuals with 2 comorbidities and age 75 and older. Those are the first people under phase 2, and that's probably going to be sometime in early February. And then after that, we jump into big categories like teachers and grocery store workers and utility workers and people like that. And then later, adults over 65, and then finally people with 1 comorbidity. And then April and June is, you know, the rest of the public. So what are we doing in Cohasset? Well, here's the thing, not every town is going to do it because health departments are completely overwhelmed. And so there's about 365 towns in Massachusetts. A handful have just said, we can't do it. It's too much. We're swamped, you know, contact tracing's taking all our time and we just can't do it. We can't take on one more thing. So Cohasset has said, yes, we're going to do it. So right now we're one of like 70 towns, 70 out of like 365. I'm sure there's going to be more, but we're all in. And they told us, if you're going to commit, you have to commit and do vaccinations from phase 1 all the way through phase 3, which we're going to do. The one caveat is that we can't jump ahead of any of these groups and move forward. Like, for example, today we did do vaccination clinics for first responders. We did 1 clinic today, we're going to do 1 tomorrow, and we'll be done, right? So you think like, great, now we can move on to the next category, which is congregate care settings. We can't. We have to wait, and we have to all move as a team, as a state. So if you go to the next slide, Chris. So this kind of shows like where we are right now. So the COVID-facing healthcare workers, they started first. That's all being done within hospitals, and that's still ongoing. Long-term care facilities, that's being done by CVS primarily for places like Sunrise, and that's ongoing. Then we get to first responders, that's the 3rd group, and that started this week. And like I said, we're doing our clinics today and tomorrow, and we're going to be done. And then next up is congregate care settings, which I didn't know we could start this week. I think they kind of just sprung this on us today. I just got the slide from DPH call today. So that is going to be the next thing we're going to plan for. And then after that, we're going to plan for the home-based care, healthcare workers, and the non-COVID facing healthcare workers. So our next step is to evaluate how the clinics went today and tomorrow. What do we have to do to ramp things up even more? And really, we're looking at planning, and I think a big push for us as a local health department is going to be in February. But also understand too that your vaccines aren't necessarily just coming from like our local health department. There's also going to be CVS and Walgreens are going to do them, and the Stop and Shop pharmacy is going to do them, and your local primary care physician is going to do them. And then there's going to be giant mass vaccine sites, and they're going to be like 5 of them in the state. So the big local one for us will be Gillette Stadium. And so the state is going to be running those and gearing those up. So, you know, right now it's tight, and they're not releasing much vaccine. but I think it's going to start building momentum pretty soon. And I think February will be when we can really start pushing it out.
I have a question, and again, this is more from people that have called me, and I don't know exactly what to tell them, but should they be expecting to get their vaccine from their town health department as opposed to their primary care? I mean, people, or go into CVS. I mean, is there some kind of a hierarchy of where people should be looking to get access to the vaccine?
Yep. So the slide that I just showed that showed how the state's all moving together. So they're really running the show, and we're like one piece in there. And I think they'll probably make announcements as like we move into like as they start a new category, because they'll tell us like, okay, starting today you can do this group. And I think they're going to plan ahead and say like, all right, by the way, not only is the local clinics going to be up, but also CVS, we now gave it to them to start doing it. They're also going to build a map, like a vaccine clinic kind of map where you can go and click on like a town or something. So like, honestly, our clinics are going to be private. When people click on Cohasset, they're going to say private clinic for healthcare workers or something like that. But you can go to this map and see like, where is there an open site? It's actually pretty similar to the testing maps that have been up there for now. So I can't even tell you now at this point because, I'm not in the back rooms of DPH and, what they're talking about, but I know the interactive map is coming as they get more information, and they're ramping it up and they're planning to.
Do you anticipate that, let's say, when it's available for 75-year-olds or 65-year-olds or even the public, that at the same time CVS and Walgreens are going to be offering it for the public at that same age? And so you're
Yeah,
just, town health
I don't
is
even
one?
know, Diane. I hope so. I'll put it
Okay.
that way. I hope so. But I'm
Okay.
not 100%. I don't think
Okay.
they know yet.
Okay. Yeah,
So
it's hard. Yeah.
I think so. We're going to do planning ourselves after this. So I think we're going to look at that big group, which is going to be the 2 comorbidities and the 75 and older when that starts in phase 2, and that will be sometime in February. So we're going to start planning, well, how are we going to handle that? We can only have so many people in a clinic. So are we going to say this link is for people in this area of town, this link is that area of town? We're going to have to figure out how we're going to do it logistically. And honestly, we're not really quite sure yet. The first responder clinic that we did today and tomorrow, I mean, that was very contained and small. So that was relatively easy, to send out links to just certain groups of people. So once we get to more wide open groups, that's what we have to figure out. So we started a vaccine group, I forget the name of it, but that's where we like a vaccine planning group basically. And that's what we're going to start planning this week, and how are we going to pull this off?
Because you're also going to need how many doses that you need to have when
Right.
bring
And so
people
what
in.
we're going to do is we'll plan clinics, and we'll decide as a group, are we going to try to do 3 clinics a week, 2 clinics a week, 5 clinics a week? And if so, how many vaccinators are we going to have? And then, we'll figure out how much we can do, and that will be how many doses we can do. And then we'll put in the order to DPH and see if they can meet it. And then,
Okay.
we'll figure it out.
Thank you. I know there's no easy answer, and I appreciate it.
I know I'm getting calls too, believe me, I know.
I know. And
Question?
everybody's panicked,
I
frankly.
know.
Carrie?
Chris,
just
I
wanna-
didn't mean to interrupt. Chris, can you punch up that other little group of slides that I sent? Just a little bit more detail on a couple of websites I want to talk about, because it
Chief,
answers a couple of these questions.
Can I hold you for 1 second? Because Carrie had a question.
No, quick comment, just standing up for Pam and all the leadership in town. Pam, you're doing the best you can with limited information. And I know that there are a lot of mixed messages coming from statewide and national government. And just thank you for all that you're doing. But for everyone in town, just sit tight, be kind to Pam. We
Be
are
kind to everybody.
we're trying as a town to get all this information, and a lot of it, unfortunately, we just don't know yet. So everyone's trying their best. So just thank you, Pam. I know that you don't know the answers to a lot of these things, and that's not your fault.
Oh, thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I know it's frustrating. Believe me, I wish we could do it. I mean, obviously the hospital workers had to get it first, the first responders. I mean, I think like from here on out, it would be so much easier for us if we could just say, all right, here we go, 80 and older, 75 and older, you know, and just start pushing it out. It would be great. And I think we could push it out fast being a small town, but we're handcuffed by the state, and unfortunately, and we got to abide by them. Those are the rules.
Thank
Quick
you.
question.
Corey?
Pam, do we know what version of the vaccine that the town is getting? Is it always going to be Moderna, or are you at some point going to switch to another version?
So it's definitely just Moderna for now, but I think Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca are pretty close to getting approval. Well, I don't know.
Okay,
Dr.
just
Schubert may know more than me. Once they get approval,
now
that
it's
really
Moderna.
should start ramping stuff up even more. So maybe there'll be more momentum come like March or something like that. But for now, we're going with just Moderna.
all right. Thanks.
Paul?
So the other two vaccines out there are, I suspect, will be probably within the month. The Brits did okay. The third vaccine, I think it's the
AstraZeneca.
AstraZeneca. So we typically follow with the FDA, usually about 2 weeks behind. So every Thursday they meet after they review it. So they'll probably review it, I think, if not this Thursday, next Thursday. It'll take a week to vote on it. So earliest would be 3 weeks. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, Chief Sylvia?
Yeah, Chris, yeah, there we go. So this is just real quick, again, to build on what Kerry just mentioned. We don't know what we don't know. We are planning, in fact, we'll do an after action meeting on Thursday. It's already planned to discuss the two clinics that we've done on Tuesday and Wednesday. What went well, what do we need to improve? What's our possible volume level that we can handle? The whole shooting match. The biggest piece of this is that because this is the first time anybody's ever had this vaccine, they have to sit for 15 minutes and be watched. So that slows us down considerably. It's not like a flu clinic where everybody comes in, gets a shot, and walks back out. So that's going to slow us down. But what I wanted to mention here is, what, you know, the question is, when can I get my vaccine? This is the state website. If you go to this website, you're going to know everything that we know. That's what it comes down to. We don't have a special pipeline. As great a job as Pam and Mary Goodwin and everybody else at Public Health are doing, they're not getting the details until maybe a day before everybody else. It's not like they have this timeline that is mysterious. If you can go to the next slide, Chris. So just again, Pam already mentioned this. This is the phase we're in right now. This will run through until the 1st of February. So hopefully we'll get all of this stuff done. And as you can see, there's things here that we'll be doing in town. The healthcare workers that are non-COVID facing, that's possibly a clinic we could do. The home-based healthcare workers is a clinic we could do. Congregate care settings, that's a question of how that's going to get done. We don't know. So these are the things that we're working. And again, the state is driving this bus. Could you go again, Chris, please? So then we get to February, and this is where, as Pam said, the vast majority of everybody is. And again, it's in priority. So we will start these processes once we're told when we can start them and when we get vaccine. All right, so that's February and March. And then next slide, Chris. Then, of course, phase 3 is when it's open to the general public. So these, again, are hopefully, these are timelines. Now, last slide, please, Chris. I put this in because this is straight from the website. Okay, they're actively clarifying where each group resides in the vaccination prioritization. Okay, so the bottom line is the state, again, making these decisions, and they'll be made and we'll be told about it. And then the last piece is just, if you have questions, there's a state website that you can go in and send your questions. And they, if enough people ask the same question, it'll make a Q&A, maybe they change some things or whatever the case may be. But the bottom line is just where we're coming from. These are being decided at the state level, not the local level. We're going to be told when we're going to get our vaccine and how the timeline may change. I'm hoping, as Dr. Schubert just mentioned, that more vaccine will become available and all these timelines will be sped up. So I look at these almost as worst case scenarios, and we're hoping for a much better case as we move forward into February and into March. That's what I had. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Anybody else? And I just want to say my questions aren't because I don't, but I'm trying to press on the issues, but there are just a lot of people in the community that, are unnerved, and sending them to a state website isn't good enough sometimes. But I just wanted to reiterate and let you all have an opportunity to speak. And we so appreciate everything everybody's doing. Paul?
So I just wanted to mention that, this is along the lines of a polio vaccination program, a measles vaccination program, or probably the younger people in the crowd, rubella vaccination program. In the 60s, in the late 50s, we had in place a lot of these vaccination places set up, and the infrastructure was there. We've not done a mass vaccination program like this that is with such importance and the need to be done so quickly since the polio and since the measles in the 60s. So a lot of this, we have to look back on how they did it. Now, when they did do it, the one thing that was not a worry was having people in the group spread the disease amongst those getting vaccinated. It looks like there was an outbreak at the VA hospital, I believe it was in Pennsylvania, where in the vaccination of the worker, someone probably had it and gave it to someone who was being vaccinated. So this is another, it's very contagious. So we have to go back to how do we do it before, and we have to try to remember and try to basically re-engineer it in a situation where if you do get it standing in line, it's a bad thing. So on top of that, the sheer numbers of vaccination doses are limited. So that's right now the biggest limitation is dosing. That's it.
Paul, do you anticipate, the local health officials being really the primary distributor of the vaccine eventually?
I think eventually
it's
it might be. I mean, that's how the polio and how the measles was done. It was done at the town level, and you had basically a gigantic number of doses, and they'd come by with the polio gun, which I got, and a measles, which was done that way. I think if there's enough vaccines and they're cold stable enough, you could. It's a matter of, do you have the staff? Do you have the infrastructure? Do you have the ability to do that? In the 60s, it was commonplace to have multiple vaccinations for measles and mumps and rubella and polio and all of these. It's not there now. We have to reorganize and reconstruct it. But yeah, I think it could be done. Yeah, down the road.
And that begs the question, Chris and Glenn, and in terms of let's say it gets to that point where we have vaccines and we're administering it to the public, do we need staff? How do we pay for that? How do we reinforce so that Pam's not working 80 hours a week? Because the demand is certainly going to be there. Is that something CARES Act money comes when we get the vaccine? Do we get money for clinics? That kind of thing.
That's all. Those are all questions, Diane, that we're talking through now. If there's some, we can't bear the entire cost ourselves. That doesn't make sense. That said, if there's some extra money that we may need to pull, we may have to, if we have to go to the advisory committee or something, we'll do that. We'll let you know. There are already discussions of money coming for these kinds of things. The process for how it works, though, is still to be determined, right? So the state is still kind of making this up as they go. So we're going to keep partnering with them, and obviously we'll keep all of you fully informed and the community as well. So it's good news. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we are on a path.
Right. Any other questions from select board? Glenn?
I just have one little historical piece to add to what Dr. Schubert was saying. Here's what they gave the kids who were involved in the polio vaccine trials back in 1954. I don't know if you can see it. Oops, I get it on there. Oops.
Oh, little pin.
Little pin, it says polio pioneer. You see that? So I don't think
Wow.
we'll be giving those out for COVID, but I still have my polio.
Oh, that's kind of neat. It might be nice to have a badge. Any questions from the select board? Okay.
Before we move on though, Madam Chairperson, just again, obviously, as Pam said with her very first slide, we are in the middle of the surge. The only way we can protect ourselves, and I start to sound like the governor himself, but wear your mask, stay away from people, wash your hands, stay in your little bubble, okay? As the Secretary of Public Health likes to say, her fidelity bubble, okay? Stay in your little bubble, and that's what you can do to help manage this until we can get to this vaccine stage. Other than that, you know, we have to do these things, or this surge is going to continue. As Pam already said, we saw it because of Thanksgiving, but now it's building upon itself. And, you know, this is what they told us was going to happen last spring. And because we locked down and we didn't do those things, it didn't happen. Now it is. So, you know, again, to hammer the thing, wear your mask, stay away from people, wash your hands. If you don't feel well, stay home. There's plenty of testing sites. Get tested, and then we'll get the vaccine out as quickly as we can.
And thank you for bringing up testing. That's another something that people have been asking about. And I have been just directing them to either, you know, if they're symptomatic, to call their doctors, in which case it's usually covered by insurance. And otherwise, there are clinics through some of the urgent care facilities, and also the one in, which is privately run in Hingham. A lot of people have asked about free clinics. And as far as I know, there aren't any unless your doctor is, you know, ordering a test for you. I assume that's the current information to get out to the public.
Well, there is a free clinic for those Stop the Spread sites. I think the closest one to here may be like in Brockton or something. And just to let people know too, we did look into it to see if we could have a mobile clinic in town, even just once a week or something. It turned out it would be a lot of money. They would charge the town. We don't have the money. We don't have any more CARES money. We're not a big town like Hingham or Milton or something. They got a lot of money from CARES Act. So we looked into it. It just wasn't feasible.
Great, thank you.
And along that line, just obviously the Hingham site is open 7 days a week. Manat Health in Hull has one clinic on Wednesdays by appointment, and then obviously Health Express. And as was mentioned, I think you just mentioned it, Diane, that if you are symptomatic, your doctor will send you to South Shore or whatever to get it, and there is no cost to you. If you're just getting a test because you want to travel, you're going to pay. That's a different story. So, you know, but there are sites, and I don't know that anybody that wants to get a test that hasn't been able to get a test.
Thank you. Paul?
So one thing to add, as the vaccines roll out, it's still going to be a 2-month rollout from the time you get your vaccine to the time you get your second and you're fully vaccinated. So it's not just a magic switch that gets switched on. It's still got an 8-week lag period before you're totally vaccinated. During that time, you know, the ongoing surge right now, it's pretty awful. The hospital is pretty full. It's really demanding on all the healthcare and all the EMTs and all the firefighters and the police and the transit workers. It's not over yet. So we've got about 8 weeks of this really most difficult situation. I mean, this is, you know, Now is the winter of our discontent. You know, Richard III, I can't underestimate enough that this is a really difficult time, and just wash your hands, don't travel, don't go out of your house if you don't have to, don't have people over. Give the system a little bit of time, and we will get the vaccinations out there. We're going to get through the surge, but it's pretty tough right now. That's it.
Thanks, Paul. It almost feels trite to every meeting to just say thank you, but I mean, this is a difficult time for everybody. Everything is kind of funneling down to local government. So the work you all do and we all do is more important than ever. And it's stressful, and we get it. And you know, the more we can just try to answer people's questions, we can't solve the problems that we're all facing right now. But I'm really glad to have partners and all of you here. And I think the town's very, very lucky to have as many people kind of looking out for their best interest as possible. So thank you. All right. Anything else? Pam, is that a wave goodbye? And Chief, thank you. And I've already had a couple of text messages today that said, why aren't you talking about speed limits? So we'll get to hear from you, Chief Quigley, soon, I think, right? Not this meeting.
We're trying to handle the world pandemic first.
Yeah. All right. And yeah, I keep trying to, I hope you can back me up. I keep trying to tell people, yes, we have a few more important things to do, but we'll get there. Great. Thank you. Great. Town Council Paul Durensis is joining us. I wanted to, last night we got sort of a summary of some of the discussion points for this evening relating to the current legal contracts that we have. I feel as if I'm not fully prepared to have a full out conversation about this. And I wanted to ask the board's indulgence to consider postponing this particular agenda item. I did mention this to Paul Durensis earlier today before this meeting to another meeting. We have a lot to talk about with respect to legal services across the board, as well as future legal services, current legal services. We were hoping tonight to talk specifically about our two firms that we are working with that have not had an official stamp of approval by the Board of Selectmen, that being Clifford and Kenny, which is our labor counsel, and town council, just because of their switch from one firm to another. I feel we would be serving each other and our councils better if we have some time to have a more time to review all the materials and actually have sort of a focused discussion on what the contracts are, what we're looking for from legal, and dedicate a full meeting to that discussion. So I'm asking if my colleagues are willing to postpone this agenda item. Paul's here for a couple other reasons as well, whether that would be okay with you. Otherwise, we will talk about Clifford and Kenny at the very least. Thoughts, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also not comfortable with how we're doing this. I think we need a lot more attention, a lot better discussion, and a lot more time to kind of review what we're trying to do. I know we've talked about it, but it just, I wouldn't be comfortable doing anything. So, you know, I would support a motion to not do this right now, because I'm just not in a place where I can, you know, tell the town or any of you that, you know, I'm going to be able to make a good decision on this.
And we get to see Paul. Hey, Paul, welcome. Okay.
Mr. Creighton's got his hand up too.
Yep, Jack.
Yeah, Diane, I think that's a prudent thing to do. I have been attempting for a year and a half to get records of the various billings, the attorneys that have been used. And actually, I just got, thank you, Chris, I finally got some things I've been asking for 6 months, about an hour and 15 minutes ago. I think it's a comprehensive issue. Paul Durensis was appointed in 1996. When Richard Henderson retired, and we all remember Rich Henderson fondly. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And you know, we might really want to really elevate this to you know, a special committee or whatever, to, because there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of legal specialties. There's several models. Some models are you have a town council who then delegates within him. The other model is you hire special different councils, but all of this is done by the select board. All right, this is a prerogative of the select board. And I think there's been a lot of discussion about it. Well, there's reasons this, and we needed to grab this, or this guy couldn't do that. But it comes to a select board, and I think the select board really is well advised to internally address this difficult issue and come up with a long-term legal plan, because this town in this day and age certainly needs good representation. So I think it's a great idea, and I think we should probably have a special committee of the select board to, you know, to do this. That's my opinion, and I think it's time that we finally address this.
One of the things that I was sort of hoping for, and then there was what we were going to take care of tonight was really just kind of affirming things that hadn't been formally approved for whatever the reasons are by a recent select board. But I do agree with the kind of comprehensive approach. And, you know, I think Chris did a memo that I think he resent tonight, just a little while ago, did that in the early fall that kind of listed where we were with everybody. And, you know, I thought tonight we could kind of just take care of loose ends as I see it, but it is much more of a more comprehensive approach that we need to have. So I would like to propose, at least initially, that over the next couple of weeks, I work with Chris and Carrie as vice chair and Paul to kind of pull together all the materials that we've been sent at various points, including over the last couple of days and in the fall. Make sure we have sort of a packet of information, very specific, so that we all know who's on first and what's on second. And we have a meeting that's dedicated to a discussion of kind of where we're at and where we want to go, and then move from there on what those next steps might be, whether it's a subcommittee or something. Does that sit well with people? And then also, second part of that question is, would everyone here be willing to do a meeting that's not on a Tuesday night, or maybe on a Wednesday or a Thursday night sometime this month, so that we can get this moving? Carrie?
I think we definitely need a separate meeting just devoted to this topic. So I think that's a great idea. I agree with what everyone has said.
Thank you. Paul?
I'd agree. I think we need a separate dedicated meeting for that. And yeah, if it fits in the schedule, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right.
I
Can I
would,
make a motion? I was going to make a motion. Sorry,
Yeah,
Jack.
Do you want to set a date now, Diane, just to
Yeah,
wrap it up? So that-
I do. So let me take Jack as a comment, then Corey, I'll ask you for a motion, and then we'll talk about a date. Thank you.
well, I think that we should take one step at a time. I think everybody agrees that we need to have a meeting and to separately, you know, address this. I would probably have some concerns about the fact gathering, and I don't need to go into there now, into details now, but I can assure you there are some statements of facts that I have heard and that I've seen written that I think factually may be a matter of questioning.
Okay,
And
so-
I think that we ought to be very careful that if we have a quote group to do fact searching, that we need to, I think we need an outside counsel to do it, quite honestly. I think there are some things that I don't want to go into this evening, but there are some things that may or may not have happened, which could potentially raise some serious issues. And I think we need an independent counsel to look into these things.
Okay, Jack, I'll follow up with you on that. Thank you. So Corey, would you like to make a motion just to basically postpone this, the ratification agenda item?
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to postpone the ratification of legal agreements to a future date to be determined.
Is there a
Second.
second?
That,
All right, got a second? Okay, roll call vote, beginning with Jack.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Carrie Thompson, I.
And does, I'm just throwing it out there, the Thursday, January 28th. I would
request
say
not a
next.
Thursday?
Oh, it isn't? Thanks,
No,
Corey.
can I just
Can you
request
tell I'm
not
not
a
looking at a
Thursday?
calendar? Our next meeting is the 26th, isn't it?
I'm not saying it's a Thursday or not. I'm just requesting not a Thursday.
Oh, not a
just,
Thursday. I'm sorry.
just a-
I had the date wrong.
It's-
Wednesday, the 25th, we're meeting on the 26th, so Wednesday would be the 27th. To Jack's point, I want to make sure that we have at least a full week of making sure we address any issues that we want to make sure are at the meeting so that it can get on an agenda and we can do this right, as opposed to rushing any process.
I think I agree with you, Diane. The only thing that I feel strenuously about, and I feel very strenuously, if you look over my shoulder, there's a map of Sugarloaf. And I intend to be at Sugarloaf from 31st to the 5th. So if you want to slip something by me, we should have a meeting on the 3rd and I won't be here.
That will not happen.
But I
And
think
as
probably
So the third?
afterwards.
as a sister,
I think that we have a lot of this. This is a really major issue to get our legal done correctly. And I don't think in 2 weeks we can begin to address what we need to address to really resolve this once and for all. I'd like to have a little bit of extra time to really do it right. And I think probably the beginning in early February is about as early as we can get that done. Because we may be asking for a lot of councils to do some access and produce records. And I don't really know, but I don't think it needs to be time pressed.
I think there's a lot there. I think we could probably have a meeting to at least design kind of a map forward
That's fine. Yeah, that
sooner
would be-
rather
yeah.
than later.
Yeah.
Carrie?
I'm fine with postponing until February, but I do teach Wednesday night, so I can never
Okay.
do Wednesdays. So if
Okay.
Thursday
Then
can't
fine.
be
Thursday's
Thursday,
fine.
maybe we
Okay.
need to do a Monday. And also real quick, Diane, we have a question or comment from Tom Callahan at 35 Hillside Drive saying, choices of council is ultimately your decision, but the land use permitting boards are big users of legal services. May I suggest that however you study this, can the land use boards participate in some way?
And my answer to that is absolutely. I mean, we're not, and I think that that's the kind of cooperation we've had over the past number of years, is making sure we have counsel on matters that work well with the boards that they're assigned to. I mean, frankly, the select board very rarely works hand in hand with the attorneys, like say Conservation Commission might, or ZBA,
Yeah.
or planning, because Chris is our kind of agent in that area. So absolutely, in terms of going forward and any kind of RFP or any kind of structure of how we're going to look at legal, that will be a much more comprehensive discussion and plan involving the various stakeholders. There's also the matter of kind of like where we're at right now, what's working, what isn't working in general. And what we were planning to do is literally just tying up these loose ends with some contract ratifications. So there's a couple of steps, and we intend to be transparent and cooperative with the boards that do work, and obviously with Chris, who has the day-to-day operations responsibility for the town. So does that make
Conservation, I'm sure they've expressed, many of their members have expressed to me that they also want a seat at the table. And I think it's common sense.
I think there's a difference between a seat at the table and
Well, I know what
us
you
being intentional about soliciting input. So thank
Yeah.
you, and we will certainly intend to do that. So back to, is it worth having sort of an initial check-in meeting, and what does Monday, the 25th look like for people? And then maybe that's where we just take some time, we focus on some of the documents we have, and we set a roadmap for, we need to ratify this contract. We need to make sure this is set. What are we doing going forward? How do we want to get input from other boards and go forward with this?
Like that.
That works for me.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it should be an open, no agenda, no preconditions, that we sit down and can talk back and forth and say what's important, what isn't important, and see if we can hash out a plan to move forward.
Okay. Chris, sound good?
Whatever you're looking for, 6 PM or 7,
I'm sorry,
6 PM or 7.
does anybody have a preference? I don't. 6
Well,
PM,
what day of the week is it? 25th?
Monday.
Monday? 6 is fine.
Yeah, 6 is
Everybody, Corey, you hedging on that one? 6:30,
I
want to split
put
the
my kids to
difference?
bed at
7.
6:30, so I just,
7.
7, it's 7 o'clock
7.
then.
thank you all.
You're
I'm
welcome.
not leaving the state for a few months, so.
Okay, yeah, exactly, you're
Yeah,
good.
really, what do you
Okay.
have? What else do you have?
All right, I think we're good. I appreciate everybody's patience and care on this, because it really is important. Thank you, Paul, for being here. And now we actually get to move on to utilizing Paul and his expertise. So in December, there was an open meeting law training and a discussion, or at least a presentation from Paul that I think he would like to just run by us again on the requirements for meeting minutes. And I know Jack has asked about recordings, and that's why Paul, one of the reasons why Paul is here with us tonight, so that we can kind of all hear the same information at the same time and feel comfortable moving forward about the minutes that we have, the minutes that we approve at each meeting, and also any other options for or requirements for retaining of different records. So Paul, can we give you the floor? Justine and Paul, did you want to just sort of summarize your slides which were sent to us, or do you want to show them? Or we see you. You're on mute. Paul, you're on mute. Oh, if only we could sit around a table and just, there you go.
There we are. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for being here.
So I do have a PowerPoint presentation if you want. If you're not, I can kind of just talk, whatever you like.
Did everybody see it? It
Yeah,
came
it's a
out
good
late.
presentation. I
Can you
would
put it up?
recommend putting it up. Yeah,
Yep.
it's very good.
Tracy, can you do that, please? Can you see it, Paul?
Yes. So next.
You have the
page.
floor.
Great. So the first thing to understand is the way we're set up legally, you have to have a written set of minutes for all meetings. That's the legal requirement. You can have tape recordings, you can have the cable TV film meetings, but the governmental record is a set of minutes, written, old-fashioned minutes. And the minutes have to include the date, the time, and the place of the meeting, the members present or absent, a summary of each and every topic, and a list of all documents and materials used at the meeting. All votes have to be recorded, and there has to be a record of all decisions made and actions taken. These minutes become the permanent record to be kept essentially in perpetuity. So next slide, please.
Oh, just a quick question on that, because I remember this coming up when we were discussing town hall renovations. Like, do we have to keep a physical paper record, or are those allowed to be digitized?
They can be digitized, but everybody is keeping them in writing, because that's the way it goes back to when they use the quill pen. And it's just 300 years of written records.
Got it.
But yeah, for preservation of paper and deterioration and all that kind of stuff, certainly protecting it by digitalizing it is a good idea. So we can pretty much skip this page. This slide is about who prepares the minutes. So some boards and committees have a clerk. And so sometimes the clerk prepares the minutes. Some boards and committees have the chair not only run the meetings, but also do the minutes. If you have professional staff, you can have professional staff do it. But the one that's becoming most popular now is to have paid minute takers. That is, you actually hire somebody on a part-time basis. They work from home, they listen to the meetings, usually remotely. They're completely uninvolved otherwise, and they prepare the minutes. We ask that all minutes should be signed by the preparer. So if you hire someone to do it, or it's the chair, whoever it is, it should be designated so that for the future reference, you know who prepared the minutes.
So Paul, select boards are sort of hiring out like a third party, like a minute taker professional who could be
Yes.
in New York State and listening to our meetings,
Yes,
remote or not.
yes,
Okay, thank you.
quite common now. And if they're good, then they end up doing multiple committees. It's typically somebody who's working from home anyway.
Yep,
And so they just zoom in, they listen. They don't even have to be present at the meeting. They can
right.
listen to recordings of the meetings when they're broadcast on cable, and this is a variety of ways that it's done. So then the next slide is about the town being required to retain all minutes and materials of all meetings. So we've had situations in other towns where, for example, the finance committee hadn't prepared any minutes for 7 years. The finance committee is equivalent to your
Advisory board. yeah.
advisory. It's very difficult, but required to reconstruct 7 years worth of minutes. Not an easy thing to do. You have to have minutes for both the public sessions and the executive sessions. We'd like to see all the minutes filed with the town clerks so they're in a central location. It used to be undesignated, so oftentimes when you wanted to see the minutes, you had to call the chair, and you found out that the chair had the minutes at home and kept it as part of their working files. But that's not acceptable because it's not accessible to the public, which is the whole point of all of this. Now, most meetings, particularly of boards of selectmen, are recorded. And the recordings are themselves public records. So the statute says the minutes of any open session, the notes, or other materials used in the preparation of such materials, and all documents and exhibits used in the session shall be public records in their entirety. So if you are recording your meeting, then that itself is a public record.
So that's a place I want to stop and ask a question, and anybody else that wants to ask a question. So especially, I mean, all of our meetings are recorded and certainly subject to public, you know, if they're retained, they have to be provided for. The question is, legally, do they have to be kept, the recordings of meetings? And if so, what's the best mechanism to do that? I mean, we've talked about, you know, the Cohasset 143 TV, which Corey's on the board of. They have been recording our meetings.
Madam
But-
Chair?
Yes.
Might I suggest we just, because I think what you're asking is going to be on the next slide, but like,
Okay,
let's wait the discussion until afterwards that we can all see
Thank
each
you.
other and okay, thank you, sorry.
appreciate it. No problem.
Yes, the next slide tells you that under the Secretary of State's regulations, you can dispose of the drafts and the recordings after adoption of the formal final minutes.
Got it.
So that's permissive, that's not required.
Right.
And if these recordings are in the hands of a third party, you have no say over that. When we're talking about public records, we're talking about recordings made by the town and essentially owned by the town. The fact that there may be others who have recordings, that's up to them as to what they want to retain or not retain. As far as what this retention schedule is, this authorizes the disposal of these things, but does not require it. That's up to you whether you want to keep something or not. So the next slide would be the disposal of when minutes are approved. Recordings include any audio or visual recording of a meeting by the public body or authorized by the public body. This includes recordings by public bodies to use as an aid in drafting the final version of the minutes. So again, the point is the drafts can be disposed of when minutes are approved, unless they are substantially different from the final version as approved.
Hmm.
And the next slide is when should minutes be approved? So if you can dispose of a recording when they're approved, well, when is that? So the guidelines say timely, approved in a timely manner. A timely manner will generally be considered to be within the next 3 public body meetings or within 30 days, whichever is later, unless the public body can show good cause for further delay. So the Attorney General is encouraging the approval of minutes at the next meeting whenever possible. The beauty of that last recommendation is that it sets the stage for the next meeting. In other words, as you prepare for your meeting today, for example, if you have the minutes of the last meeting, it allows you to kind of pick up the thread of what you were doing and what you were working on and brings it all back to you. And it's fresh for you so that if you have a change you think ought to be made in the minutes because something needs to be clarified, it's right there in your mind. As opposed to the example that I mentioned where Finance Committee was trying to do minutes 7 years later and trying to remember what happened at a particular meeting.
Not
But it's
very good.
useful to set you up to as to how you're going to handle the meeting if you know the theme.
Where
of
you
it.
last left off, exactly.
Yeah. The Cohasset standard, though, in your Cohasset Committee handbook, here's what you all have provided. For Cohasset, each board and committee shall vote to approve the minutes of their previous meeting at their next scheduled meeting and issue the approved minutes to the town clerk and all other interested boards and committees within 10 working days of the approval vote. So that's the standard that Cohasset has established for approval of these minutes. Next meeting, and then copy others. So if you are regularly copying, for example, the Board of Health and Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, the whole idea is to get those out on a current basis so others can follow what you're doing.
Yeah.
This is to let you know that while you're working on getting your minutes done, it doesn't stop people from asking for them. So they can come in the middle of the process or early in the process or the next day after your meeting and ask for those minutes. The idea is you give them your notes, you can give them the recording, you can give them drafts. They don't have to be approved, but you can wait 10 days before you give them a set of minutes. But there needs to be a fairly prompt response for somebody asking for these minutes.
So in other words, if there is a public records request for a set of minutes or recording or whatever of a meeting and there aren't approved minutes, they could, as part of the fulfillment of their records request, they could be given a draft set or they could be given a recording.
Yes.
Because theoretically, the board might not be meeting for another whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that will comply.
Yeah.
And then, hooray, the last slide.
Then questions.
You have a question?
No,
No,
we'll do it after the last slide.
Okay. The last slide is that in your bylaws, you ask for something a little different from what the state requires for minutes. Here it says each board, commission, or committee shall keep records of its meetings and other proceedings sufficient to ensure continuity in its operations from year to year. So it's a slightly different standard and it suggests a purpose, an additional purpose beyond that of what the public records law requires. That is, you want to have minutes that are sufficient to provide for this continuity of operations. So if there's a change of people on a committee, they can read the minutes and know where to pick up and where the other group left off.
Great.
And that's it.
So I'll ask if anybody has any questions. I think some of our challenges, or at least the challenges in my mind, have been, sort of, especially now in the Zoom world where we are retaining, well, there are recordings of every meeting, sort of what happens to them and at what point because we couldn't possibly even afford the digital, space to record meetings in perpetuity. Or maybe we could. I don't know the answer to that because I don't know what it costs. I think our minutes we generally follow those guidelines. We do get behind, but I think our minutes have a lot of information in it. And when they read sort of conversational, then that, to me, when I read the thing, it says, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. While that's thorough and good, it sometimes slows down the approval process because we're like, well, I don't know if that's exactly how I said it, kind of thing. And I get stuck on that a lot with it. So we want to try to find an appropriate, streamlined, legal, transparent, efficient way to do our minutes. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation tonight, to make sure we all at least understood what our requirements are and how we want to go forward. Corey, yeah, especially I want to hear from Corey with respect to recordings.
So yeah, there are kind of two things here that I really caught my ear, and one of them, my apologies, is not recordings. Council Durrance has mentioned having an outside firm take minutes, and that has been something that's been on my mind. And as somebody who is also on the 143 TV board, and on, we're all on some other working groups, the meeting minutes, I think, are an enormous burden on especially the citizens that we have in this town that are volunteering their time. And I do know that, who takes the meeting minutes, submitting them is the thing that it seems like people dread the most. And I do know that getting people on these boards is difficult. I think if we remove that hurdle from them, we'd be, one, fulfilling our fiduciary responsibilities better, and we'd make people a lot happier. So, I would love to see, proposal for how much that would cost us, how that would be done, and all that stuff. On the video side, the YouTube channel doesn't cost us anything. It is free. However, I do want to hear from Attorney Durrance specifically on what his guidance would be on, is this stuff that we want to keep forever? And if we have a recording, does it have to be public? I'm a little bit afraid of having, 100 videos that are on a drive somewhere and only 50 of them are up publicly. And that's a gulf that I'm not comfortable with. And I think we should sit down with all of us and decide what it is. If we say we only need them up for 30 days or 50 days, I'd rather have them be live all the time. But if council feels that having full videos out there forever is not the best way to do this, then I'm open to hearing about that as well.
So let me say a few things. Once you can dispose of recordings, there is no standard by which how long you keep them and where you keep them. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can decide that you're going to keep recordings for 6 months and then dispose of them, or you can decide, it's up to you, that you're going to keep them forever. They are classified as a public record, separate from the minutes. That does mean the public has access to it and can see it at any time by filing a public records request with the town. So if you keep the recordings, you've got to make it available to those who request it. I also want to make a comment about something that an earlier speaker said, which was about the level of detail in your minutes. You had 4 set of minutes in the packet for tonight's meeting, and so I read all 4. And all 4 complies with the requirements that we talked about. Everything that is required to be in minutes are contained in the minutes that are before you for approval today. It does, however, contain more information than is needed by law. But I didn't see anything harmful in all that material. For example, when I read the one of the meeting in December near Christmas, I think I read 4 or 5 times that I was wished a happy holidays and Merry Christmas and so on. There's certainly nothing illegal about being wished Merry Christmas so many times. It does represent something of a burden on staff to have to keep track of who said what and to record all of that in minutes makes the minutes longer. If you do hire an outside person to do your minutes, it's just going to make it more expensive if you have longer minutes with 5 Merry Christmases as opposed to saying the board members all wished everybody Merry Christmas. But there's certainly nothing wrong with.
Do they pay by word? Do they charge by word? Yeah.
I think they charge by the time, but
Yeah.
in the town where I'm a select board member, we have these outside people that turn out to be pretty accurate.
So Paul has a question, and then I want to try to summarize and move on.
So you said that if the town does the recordings, they're responsible for preserving the recordings. Is that correct?
Or not.
Say that again?
If the town records a given meeting, they're responsible for the recordings, correct? For
They're
preserving.
responsible for the recordings, but they're allowed to dispose of them as soon as
Okay,
the
so
formal minutes are
once the formal minutes are done, you can dispose of them. So as of now, Cohasset 143 TV does the recordings, but once we sign off on the minutes, they can eliminate them from their records.
That's not entirely accurate though, Paul, because the Zoom recordings are actually happening within Cohasset IT. And then we also have separately 143 TV recording the broadcast for later broadcast. So there's really 2 sets of recordings going on right now.
Right, I'm more concerned with what we have available, what's in the town. So we basically ship out to Zoom, and Zoom's a third party. I don't know whether that's actually owned by the town, but Cohasset 143, is there a quasi organization of Cohasset 143 with the town, or is that independent? So in other words, the town may not be recording anything. It's just outsourcing to Cohasset 143, which is I believe a separate organization, correct?
So the town is actually recording. I mean, so like ITS is actually when Chris or whoever hits the recording, there's a physical, it goes to our actual, as I understand it, as I was briefed on it, it goes to the storage that we own as a town.
Okay.
And then
So
separately though, we also have 143 TV recording as well for their use. But 143 TV is not a part of the town. It's actually a separate nonprofit institution.
So we don't have to worry about wiping out or removing any of that from the town point of view. It's only what's recorded in the town that the town records, that once the minutes are okayed and signed and approved, then we can not worry about the recordings, correct?
I think so. Yes, Paul. Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Jack?
A couple of things. Who decides, makes the decision as to who disposing of something? When you say the town, who in the town?
The Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen would have to vote to destroy the records.
The Board of Selectmen would set up a policy on how to handle the records.
Okay.
And then leave it to be administered by the town manager or his designee. In other words, you might vote to say, we're going to dispose of every recording 24 hours after the minutes are approved, or you might say, we're going to keep the recordings for 60 days. But you physically aren't going to be the ones to do any of that. That would be as administered by the town manager or his designees.
So
So-
that's, I'll just flag that as a potential policy discussion for a future meeting.
And the other thing I just want to point out, of course, I'm in favor of keeping it because it really solves disputes later on as to who said what. I know in conservation voted for all conservation records and recordings to be kept basically forever. And I don't know whether, I mean, that was conservation. That was the decision that the Conservation Commission made a number of years ago. And I do think that in the digital age, I have something here. It's like 8 tetrabyte of storage. So I think it's probably easy to keep these things for a long period of time. But anyway, my comments.
A question, Paul, is there any distinction on like hearing boards where, you know, a promise by somebody at a hearing as opposed to just banter at a meeting like we're having right now, where this conversation ultimately is less important once we get to some kind of summation or resolution or vote than if we're having a liquor license hearing and somebody says, you know, we will be serving alcohol till midnight, and that's what we base their,
Mhm.
or on Concom, somebody says, I am gonna put in a line of trees over here. Is there a distinction in terms of how meeting records or recordings are considered?
Well, the strength and the weakness of recordings is that it tells it the way it was. So for example, if you're having a liquor license hearing and one of you gets sick and is physically ill, visibly, that's all there. Everybody gets to see that. Whereas minutes, you have the ability to provide a little more distance.
Nuance.
Discretion.
Yes.
We'll spare you the demonstration. Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe. Okay, so in terms of next steps from the board, I mean, because I do want us to be on the same page. I think Tracy does a great job. You know, I would love to see them a little more streamlined, just because I think that would be easier on her and would satisfy the need, satisfy any requests for minutes later on, and it will tell the story of our meetings. I do agree that I would be curious about the costs for outsourcing minute taking, particularly and I don't think we can do it for every single board and committee in town. Chris and I have had this discussion, not necessarily outsourcing, but it is a burden on a lot of committee members to pull together minutes when they're trying to pay attention to a meeting. So, advisory, ones that aren't staffed, does it make sense and what would it cost, especially select board advisory, that kind of thing, to have it a third party do it. I think that's worth looking at. And then perhaps at a subsequent meeting, we talk about doing a policy on recordings and flesh that out amongst ourselves. And then just in terms of, am I the only person that would love to see our minutes streamlined a little more? I feel like the more that's in them, the more the bar is to make it, accurate in terms of what somebody actually said, if you're quoting somebody, as opposed to a summation of the kind of discussion that took place. I'd be curious to hear. Carrie, our communications professional.
Yeah, I think sometimes we confuse minutes with with being transcripts when that's not what they're supposed to be. I think there's a difference between a recorded transcript and minutes. And I do think that having minutes be a little more streamlined is probably smart. I think that we oftentimes forget what the purpose of minutes is supposed to be. So I agree with that.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I think having the backup makes us possible to have streamlined minutes. And minutes really says, we talked about this, we decided this, so that's a record. That's important. However, later on, somebody may want to say, well, what did they really mean? Or did somebody say this when they shouldn't have? Or there was a representation made. And that's where I think the backup fills that gap. So if somebody says, yeah, we really need to look into what actually happened here, then we have the record, but we don't burden the public process with overly minute minutes. I like that, minute minutes, but anyway.
Corey, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm trying to, weigh positive negatives in my head, but I do think that streamlined minutes, one, I'm not looking at the minutes to get a play-by-play transcript, as Carrie said. I think that's actually doing a disservice to people, and focusing on the good stuff. And the discussion, I'll just say this out here, and hopefully we can all ruminate about it. It's attractive to me to have the idea that the minutes are collected by a third party that isn't within town government, especially for what we do. I like the select board having its own record keeping body that's outside of town management. This may be a little finicky, and it's just it's in my head now. So just if everyone could think about that and put that on a future agenda to talk about, I'd appreciate that.
Great. Okay, great. I think this was a very useful conversation and a long time coming. So I appreciate it. Any last words?
Nope.
Just a capstone.
Chris.
I will tell you that the recordings on Zoom are processed and are available on the town's YouTube page. So there's a whole bunch of recordings up there, many for committees that have never been recorded ever before. So I do agree, Diane, that the board does need to make a decision at some point, because we're already having problems because it is not free to store this stuff. And so right now we're pushing stuff to YouTube. We're recording it on Zoom, we're managing it, we're moving it to YouTube, but we have a finite amount of storage space on the Zoom platform, and it's not, as I said.
So Chris, what would be helpful before we have this discussion? And I mean, we can have multiple tiers of, what meetings are kept. And, if we decide that we're going to expire them after 6 months or a year or whatever it might be, so that they're not there in perpetuity, it might be select board meetings, but we don't have to have an open space and rec, no offense to them, recording up on Zoom forever and ever. But I think what we need, it's like when people say we should bury the wires. Oh, we can't bury the wires, it's too expensive. What does that mean? Really, what is the cost? What are we looking at? And we're not going to be on the Zoom platform forever, I don't think. But again, what's it going to look like when we go back to in-person meetings, and how might that be different, and what kind of storage capabilities do we have? And again, what are the costs? Where do you run out, and what does it cost to, maintain? And I think that's going to help us actually narrow what we want to keep and how long we want to keep it.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to try to get some pricing and just some, just some logistical answers.
And some best practices from other municipalities as well. I think everybody's probably struggling with this.
Yeah, I agree. I think so, because it's not, typically most communities had like we do, a public access television station that recorded maybe school committee and town meeting and the select board and maybe some other meetings from time to time, and they kept them in their archive, and that was their business, right? That's what they do, and they often keep those for a very long time because that's what they exist for. Up until this point, communities generally weren't recording things like this. Now we've been pushed to it, and I also think that the world has kind of changed a little bit. I think that a lot of boards in other communities are talking about like kind of rotating meetings. Maybe you have some in person and some on Zoom, and there's talk about changing the open meetings law to allow these kinds of things to continue permanently, because right now they are still tied to the pandemic. And I know that the committee that I'm on at the MMA has talked about some legislation that's been kicked around that would allow these kinds of options to continue, which does allow different kinds of public access that wasn't allowed. There's a lot of benefits. The challenges, of course, is how do you deal with, there's always the legal side, how do you deal with the recordings and how do you maintain them? So let me get some pricing on meeting prep. Minute prep, and let me see if I can get some, at least logistics and pricing on storage. And
Great.
We have, 8 months of recordings now, so we have some idea of what that means in terms of volume. So I should get you some idea.
That sounds great. Corey?
Just one follow-up question for Mr. Durensis, Council Durensis. So if the town posts this to our YouTube account, which does have, you know, unlimited storage, all those kind of things, is that a sufficient way to archive it, or is that considered we've disposed of it and it's now just on this other platform? How is that treated if we put it on a third party like that?
I don't know enough about the technology to be able to answer that. So I have to understand better about the relationship between YouTube and the town and what that actually means. So at this point, I'm going to take that under advisement.
Yeah.
Get back.
Carrie?
Yeah, this is all unprecedented, and I know we've said that word over and over, but we also have archives now on the Facebook servers too. Think about
Mhm.
all of these live streamed meetings are now being preserved by Facebook. So I think we need to have that discussion about the third-party apps we're using that clearly have the capability, like YouTube and Facebook, to preserve our recordings, but also how we even want to digitally archive this. And I think about historic preservation for our town. I know these Zoom meetings don't seem that exciting right now, but in, 100, 200 years, people might want to look back at these. Some of them, seriously, it might be
Lord.
total entertainment for them.
That's right. The
Just to laugh at 'em, yeah.
archaeologists.
It does matter, I think. And I'm curious what the president is for other bodies. What are other towns doing? What is the State House doing? What's Congress doing? What are we doing now with digital preservation? And I know that's going to be a lot of storage required, but it is something that I think is a bigger discussion in terms of our history and maintaining it for the future.
Oh, I smell a
I-
subcommittee. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We should do that. However, this 200 years, I certainly hope I die soon.
All righty. So thank you. We're way over time, and but I think the rest of the agenda should move pretty swiftly. Thanks, Paul. Our next item on the agenda is to discuss the designation of the Shellfish Constable position as a special municipal employee. And I'll let Chris take it over, and then Paul, if you want to hang out in case we have any questions, because this is like one of the most convoluted parts of state government is the special municipal employee status.
So thank you, Diane. I guess I think I would rather have Paul explain some of this more in detail. So there's a provision in the law that allows some special municipal employee, which kind of sets them aside from a lot of the automatic conflict things that come into place. And it's usually done in a very limited way. Sometimes boards and committee members, one of our councils, who's basically a solo practitioner, is designated as a special municipal employee, so he doesn't end up in a conflict, so he can represent other towns, right? In this case, the Shellfish Constable, for a long time, a gentleman who's retired. The gentleman I'm looking to appoint is actually an active fisherman, and my concern is that he might inadvertently end up in conflict situations because of permits and things he has, and I don't want that to happen because it's a very part-time job. It's important, but it's part-time, and I wouldn't want anyone to fill his position and end up in inadvertently end up in some kind of conflict thing because he has a license for this or a permit for that, so I'm happy to have Paul explain this in more detail because he understands this better than all of us. So again, it wasn't requested. I want to be clear. It wasn't requested. This is just being proactive. I'm just concerned that there'll end up being a conflict that no one knows about, and I don't want to put someone in that kind of position accidentally because the candidate is an active fisherman and will end up interacting with the town regularly. So I just don't want there to end up being a problem that we inadvertently create for this poor volunteer
Individual, right?
It pays like $500, so it's not a pure volunteer position, but and it's important. We really want to considering where we are. I think we really need someone who's active, understands the waterways, and I don't want this to end up impacting. And this person won't take the job, by the way, if it ends up costing them some kind of inadvertent conflict.
Right. Go ahead, Paul. Thank you.
So being a special municipal employee makes it a lot easier to have more relationships with the town than if you're not a special municipal employee. And it has most impact with multiple job holdings. where, for example, somebody works as a teacher in the schools, but also wants to be a shellfish constable, or someone is a policeman, but he also wants to snowplow for the town, make a little extra money on the side. If you're a special municipal employee, all they basically need is the approval of the Board of Selectmen. If you're not a special municipal employee, it's very difficult, and some would say practically impossible, to be able to have that kind of flexibility where you can have these multiple relationships with the town of Cohasset. So it makes it easier, but still keeps it under your control. Because if this guy's a special municipal employee and wants to not only be a shellfish constable, but wants to, I don't know, snowplow for the town, for example, wants to hold both those contracts, you still get to approve it. He still has to come to you and get your approval, but that's all he needs to do. And it's relatively straightforward.
Hang on, Paul, does this make sense to do it for the position as opposed to the individual?
You can only do it for the position.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
So my understanding with the special municipal employees, this is where, like, the Board of Selectmen are special municipal employees, correct? And it comes into play where if you're a fire department member, you can be a Board of Selectmen member and have that as a way to still be an elected member and be on the police force or on the fire department. Is that correct?
Yes, the law says that if you're a community under 10,000 people, you're automatically special municipal employees. That is the Board of Selectmen. But I had a community that one day got to 10,001, and overnight the rules change. And it's a function of what the census says, and we're in the middle of a census. So if the census comes back and says the Cohasset is at 10,001, you've got a different set of rules.
Okay, unlikely this year, but probably down the road, maybe a couple years from now. But that's, I mean, that would be the similar situation, police officer, Board of Selectmen, and would be a special municipal employee, which allows him to make decisions for the town without being in conflict of interest, correct?
Basically, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Any other questions on this topic? Okay. Jack, you good? Okay. Just
Oh,
leave
yeah,
me.
I was just adjusting.
Okay, so would somebody like to make a motion to designate the position of shellfish constable as a special municipal employee?
I would like to move that we designate the position as shellfish warden as a special municipal employee.
Second,
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
All righty. Good, Chris. Good luck.
Thanks.
Moving that forward. Okay, next on the agenda is just sort of a summary of a number of committee vacancies. So we are seeking applications for a number of positions in town. Let me also say it is getting harder and harder. Mostly a lot has to do with the fact that none of us are kind of out in the community and bumping into people and saying, hey, you'd be great on this. But we do have a lot of vacancies. It is a very difficult time for people to commit to service, but it is, again, as I said earlier, very important for people to do so. So we had a resignation on the Conservation Commission. I will reach out to the chair and likely, as we've done in the past, promote an associate member into the full position. James Rosebach has resigned. And then we would most likely be looking for another associate member. We had a resignation of a full member of the Open Space and Rec Commission. These are not on your agendas because I just found out about them this morning. Other than conservation we knew about. And then there was also a full member of the Zoning Board of Appeals that is moved out of town, Peter Gertica. So thank you, Peter, for your many years of service. And they have a long-serving associate member that we will entertain for the full position on the Zoning Board of Appeals at a subsequent meeting, but that will leave an associate position open. And that's another really important permitting board. And the associates are very integral to how they operate. And I think on the ZBA, they also vote if there's, not a quorum of full members. So there's also one position still left on advisory committee. Now's a good time as we get toward to the FY22 budget to have that committee fully represented. So we need that. The school facilities committee, we've talked about it a number of times. There's 9 positions on that. 3 are appointed by the school committee, 3 are appointed by the moderator, and 3 are appointed by the select board. We only have 4 applications right now, and I think 3 are from the school realm. So we need to think about populating that committee so they can start meeting, and obviously with respect to any kind of building committees like our town hall committee, relevant experience in building and construction and procurement is really important. Sewer Commission, John Beck resigned right before the holidays. We wish him well, and that is an elected position that this person would serve the remainder of John Beck's term. Sorry to say, I don't remember what that is. But again, we would be looking to make that appointment as soon as possible, as soon as we have a candidate or 2. That is a joint appointment between the select board and the sewer commission. And then Chris, I'm going to ask you to jump in a little bit here. We also have the Ware River Water Company, which is the new Hingham Water Company, which was previously Aquarian, and they are looking for a Cohasset resident to join the Citizens Advisory Committee. So we're seeking applications for that. And if you have a sort of a definition or a scope of what that role is, Chris?
Yeah, I think they're still kind of coming together with that, but the goal is to have, input on, rates and things like that, right? They're not going to have any direct power. The select board in Hingham is the Board of Water Commissioners. That's the way it was set up when this was set up. That said, because it involves Hull and Cohasset as well, they felt it appropriate to, and it was a good idea to include representatives on this advisory committee appointed by the select boards in both Hull and Cohasset. So, you don't have to pick someone from North Cohasset, but it might make some sense to have someone who's a user, right? And I've heard, I think at least 1 or 2 names kicking around out there. So I don't know that they're fully, I think they're close to fully up and running. I haven't, my counterpart in Hingham and I have talked about other things lately, not with this. So other than that, they're looking for somebody. So
if I could appeal to both the public listening and all of us who might try to find some friends or neighbors to consider these positions, please have them submit an application form through the website or even send an email to Tracy or Chris or me or anybody. Like, we really need to keep track of this in writing, because I keep hearing, oh, so-and-so's interested, so-and-so's interested. And that's hard to manage who might be interested or not unless it's in writing. So if people are interested, they really should fill out an application form so that we can start culling these and making appointments and getting these boards full. Corey?
Would it be possible to streamline that form a bit? I remember when I was applying for it, it's pretty in depth, and there are some questions that don't have really clear answers. And, I'm in, web design and stuff, and just having people drop off is, the number one, killer of any sort of momentum. I mean, if we could collect, name, address, phone number, and hey, what are you interested in? I think it would be better that we then reach out to them and have a conversation about them and take notes rather than have them fill out this pretty long form.
Yeah, Corey, would you like to, could I designate you to just propose a streamlined application form?
Like officially, or just work on that and come back to the board?
Well, I don't think, I mean, like, we don't have it to vote. We don't have it listed on our agenda that we would vote on such a thing. But if the board were okay, I think just sort of we could just create a separate form, if you will, that's just like a notice of intent,
Yeah.
application, just so that we can move it along, so that maybe we could get it up on the website, by early next week, for example,
I'd love to, yeah, I'm happy
as
to
opposed to
interact with everybody.
reviewing.
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm happy to take that on if the board is comfortable with me doing that.
Yeah, and if you don't mind just sending something idea to Tracy so she can get something on the board that's a little bit simpler, and then we'll go through a more formal process of approving an application form, because that's how that other one came about many, many moons ago. So,
Well, yeah, one of the reasons it was created was just to streamline the process at the time, and it's always
right.
good things. So the less information you get, the more you're going to have to seek out yourselves. So that's the flip side of it, right? So,
Right, and it may not be a permanent solution, but at least right now, where we're not out and about, just to make it easy for somebody to just say, boom, 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 I'm interested, somebody give me a call, and then we'll take it from there and get more information.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that? Okay. Okay, the next thing we have to do is the Cohasset Affordable Housing Trust and the Cohasset Affordable Housing Steering Committee is looking for a select board liaison for the RFQ process for 808 Jerusalem Road. It should be somebody with amongst us with affordable housing interest. Paul is the liaison to Affordable Housing Steering Committee. If he were willing to do this, they are reviewing the RFQs that are the proposals that come in. I think Michelle's was on the call. I don't know if she still is. Oh, she is. Do you want to? Hey, Michelle, you want to kind of summarize the timeline and the time expectations for this?
Sure. So for 808 Jerusalem, we issued the RFP back in December. There is a 30-day notice requirement in the Central Register. So January 6th would have been that 30 days. We did get some Q&A back from some potential developers asking if we could extend the timeline. So we did through January 21st is when we expect to have the bids in. Just yesterday, we did hear from one of those potential developers stating that our timeline in the RFP was a little aggressive, meaning that we asked that they have their fundraising efforts and they break ground within a year, and they think that that's unrealistic due to the climate. So we're going to send out an addendum tomorrow, extending that from the time in which they get their comprehensive permit. They'll have a year to break ground from then. So we're still anticipating that the proposals come back on the 21st, and we would like to award it as soon as mid-February. So it's a 3-week turnaround if possible.
Paul, you,
Yeah, I'm willing to do it. It's, what I was interested in, plus Cindy's on the Affordable Housing Trust, so
Trust.
the information is easily accessible.
okay, great.
If that's all right.
Yeah, would anybody like to make a motion to appoint Paul as the select board liaison for this RFQ?
I move that we appoint Paul Schubert as the select board liaison for the RFQ for 808 Jerusalem Road.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Great.
Congrats, Paul.
All right, Michelle, he's your guy.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing
Keep me in
that,
the loop.
Paul. Thank you. Okay, Chris, we wanted to kind of just get a big overview of capital.
yes,
project.
so that's why Michelle is with us tonight. So Michelle's going to walk through the capital applications that are in process now. So we worked on this last fall, worked with departments, worked with the school system, school department. So capital's already started. They've gotten projects. They're going through reviews. And what you're going to see is what's being reviewed. It doesn't mean this is the final list of things that will be approved, There's quite an ask in terms of dollars. I don't know that the town will be able to afford all of it. That said, the robust conversations have begun. So the goal is to get through this and to be on time so that we can have a conversation about a tailored plan in March. So we got in about 2 months. So I've made Michelle a co-host so she can flip up. There's a big chart she has. This is not a big 17-point PowerPoint. It's just one big sheet. And it's kind of more of an overview, the goal tonight. And if you have any questions about specific projects, they'll be coming back. The capital, as I said, the capital project committee has already started meeting. They're already reviewing. We've already shared tons of data with them on all kinds of projects. So, Michelle?
Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Yep, we can see it. Okay, so high level, the total ask from all town departments is $5.4 million. We have $2 million in the capital stabilization fund. And the potential borrowing, you'll see down the bottom, is shaded at 3.2 million. So I can go through each department. So the DPW has an ask. As you can see, the salt shed is one of their bigger asks for $800,000. That's something that's been postponed year over year. I think it's at the point where there's no more repairs that can actually be made. So that's an important ask. They're also asking for a bucket truck, which is something that we've identified can be borrowed. The roads number at $550,000. We anticipate getting some Chapter 91 funding to offset that. And the other is just mechanical items for the DPW. So their total ask is $1.5 million. Facilities, you'll see there's a bunch of items here without dollar values for facilities, and that's because there's a school ask. However, we do ask facilities to weigh in, so we do keep it there without a dollar value. The only thing facilities is asking for is a department vehicle. I don't know if everyone's aware of the one vehicle that we've had in service for quite some time, but I'm not sure she's going to make it much longer, so they are asking for another vehicle.
Is that typically like a van or a truck or?
It's a truck.
Okay.
It's a truck, and it will have plow capability, so
Okay.
serve two purposes. Fire department, the command vehicle, they're asking for a hybrid vehicle, which is great because it's in line with our green communities. The replacement of their vehicle should be hybrid. Asking to refurbish engine 2, the strut system of one of the rescue vehicles, as well as a public safety facility siting study. We've been talking about that for quite some time, and it's in the capital plan this year. The harbor master. So Parker Ave boat ramp, we were given, we did obtain a grant from the SEC for the Parker Ave boat ramp design. That was for $170,000. This $325,000 indicates a 25% match for the construction of the Parker Ave boat ramp. We also have the harbor master building at $250,000. After speaking to Laurie, this is something that may be pushed out to 2023, only because she does want to partner with South Shore Votech and have them construct the building. We do have the Government Island lift system here. We were given an SEC grant for this engineering as well for $160,000. This $60,000 represents the cost of the actual conveyor system that we received quotes on. And the last item for the harbor master is cement docks at $35,000. When you look at police, they're asking for 2 vehicles. This is something they do year over year, as well as the mobile radios to go inside the vehicles for $122,000. Recreation has the Sawyer Street project, and that is really to complete the basketball courts. Beach wall basketball court repair. They're looking to renovate that entire court because there's been some damage due to tree roots over there. They're looking to add additional funding for the Milliken Field modular shed. That is a project that's gone out to RFP probably 6 or 7 times now. We were successful last year in getting a bid. that was in line with what we were willing to pay. However, we didn't have enough funding, so we're going to have to go back out to RFP on it. But we do need $113,000 based on the last set of quotes that we received.
Just
Yep, sorry.
Sorry, just a question on that, and because it goes way back, like maybe 6 years ago or 7 years ago, was there CPC funding involved in
was.
that?
There
And
was.
is that still live?
It is.
Okay,
It is. As a matter of fact, Ted did present to CPC a few weeks back on all of these projects.
okay.
And then the tennis study, this is something we've been talking about. The Bancroft courts will need some repair, or, you know, do we repair those inside a different location for tennis courts? So that's about $20,000 is for. The next is the schools with a big ask of 2.6 million. They're asking to replace the floor, cove base, and the gym entryway. While they identify that that is aesthetic, it is also, you know, the main focus point of when you walk into the school. There are some trip hazards there. They're looking to install some plumbing for a science room. They are utilizing a room right now for science, and it's just not equipped. The middle school, high school rooftop air handlers are critical. That's something that needs to be replaced at $500,000. The Deer Hill rooftop air handlers is something that we could push off probably for another year or two. However, doing them both at the same time is you get a cost savings because it's economies of scale. They're looking to replace the dust collection system in the wood shop. Replace sidewalk and curbing on the entry road to the high school, the middle school, high school. Brian Joyce has looked at that, and right now they're assessing the overall town plan and where that fits in the plan. They're looking for a place to site bus parking. They have looked at a couple of sites behind the Osgood School. Unfortunately, the clearing of the land and creating a parking lot at minimum would be about $200,000. They're looking for the high school turf and track replacement. They did present to CPC to get some funding for that. It is something that can be bonded, and Capital as well as CPC asked for a public-private partnership to see if that's something that can be done, as it has in the past. The school bus lease is $90,000. The device replacement is for Chromebooks, and we have a 3-year lease for Chromebooks, so it's $52,000 over a 3-year period. They're looking to add some security fobs to the remaining doors at the schools. They're looking to pilot a program for technology at all 3 schools for $64,000 and replace the sprinkler heads at the Osgood School. Obviously, in this plan, they still need to prioritize, you know, their top 5. Even though everything is important, we still ask all departments to prioritize their top 5 items. So that's where the total town ask is 5.4 million. And with the potential borrowing at 3.2, it means $201,000 of items will not be funded if in fact the desire is to borrow that amount of money. So I know that was quick, but.
Thank you. And I know there's many other things, but kind of the biggest is the town hall renovation project. And where is that in terms of conversation with the capital budget committee?
Sure. So
because that's going to change these numbers up.
100%. So we have not yet received the estimate. The architect has received an estimate, has sent it on to our project managers. They are reviewing the estimate now. And they said within 2 weeks, we should have a number. At that point, we can share with the board and we can share with capital what that number is. It's definitely conversations that we continue to have. There's a lot of additions to the town hall that we thought were important. And they're trying to work all that in and stay within the budget that we gave them.
And then in terms of possible upgrades, renovations, et cetera, to the garage / teen center. Is that something that, Chris, that is below the threshold, or is that coming, will that, I mean, I know we're gonna talk about that in a more fulsome way once the committee pulls together some numbers and stuff, but is that something we would see through rec, or how is that gonna fit into this as well?
So there's a process underway right now. In fact, we had a meeting this morning to talk about generating numbers and figuring out how to fund if we need to do work at the building or for any other equipment. So yes, that you will be hearing about that. I'll come to you folks first, and then we'll go through the process depending on what the numbers look like.
My concern always is having, especially going through the town hall project a number of years ago, is to try to keep capital up to speed on things that are still kind of floating out there that might end up impacting their overall vision of this, and not have it feel as if we're tagging things on at the last minute. CPC, same thing,
And we've been trying to keep. I talk to Russ fairly frequently, and they've started their process, so they have been briefed a little bit. This is something that we're developing a little more, structure around. So that said, it's definitely in the process for now.
Great. And this was not intended to be comprehensive in every single thing there. I just wanted to throw those out there. So we all know that there's more to come. Paul?
So I think because of the way the rates are so low for the interest rates, I think whatever we can consider bonding is probably a reasonable time to do it. As we come out of the pandemic, we're going to start to see interest rates rise. We're going to start to see the economy boom a little bit more. But as of now, the rates are extraordinarily low. So from a municipal point of view, it would be pretty inexpensive to try bonding the capital items we think are absolutely necessary, and then even adding additional ones that are considered, not necessarily absolutely necessary because the rates are so low. That's all.
Okay. Corey?
Just first year here, so apologies for the base level questions. This is a list that everything on this list has already gone through advisory, I'm guessing, or is this just the first draft of the list? The list you're giving us, what point of the process are we at with this?
Sure. So each department has filled out their submission form. That has gone through an internal vetting process, and it's starting to go through Capital now. Capital has all of the information. They schedule meetings every Monday now through probably mid-March. They've already met with the school committee, and their next meeting will be with DPW. The Capital Budget Committee has also assigned liaisons to each department, which has been extremely helpful. So they help them prepare for the meeting ahead of time to make sure all the questions can be answered up front.
Great. Okay, thank you. That's wonderful.
I'm on mute. Any other questions? Okay, Michelle, thank you so much. This is great. And it's actually really exciting to get into the budget process. It's fun and it's better than talking COVID. So,
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Chris.
A couple of quick things. So the sewer, the decision matrix is well underway. There's been 5 meetings with the GHD consultants and the various players from the kickoff meeting back in early December. There's been meetings with the sewer commission, with the master planning committee, with the health department, and with the sewer engineer as well. So, and I think there's another one planned in the next couple of days. So there's been a really great outreach to get all those who have some input to make sure that the matrix includes the different options that are out there and addresses potential decision pathways. So the hope is that that'll wrap in the next couple of weeks, and we will get back to the board shortly thereafter. So Brian told me I think they're going to do one more session, and then they're going to have a draft. I think it's in the next week or two. They'll have a draft matrix. They're going to then review again with folks to make sure we cover things. So.
Chris, do you anticipate this at like the first meeting or second meeting in February?
Yeah, I think it's potentially the first meeting in February. I mean, the goal is to get this moving so that you can get to town meeting if you need to. So
Right.
that's
And I think it's extra critical that we find a sewer commissioner and try to make an appointment on the 26th.
so yeah. So that process is going along well, and I think it's been good. There's been a lot of good input. I hosted one of the sessions myself, and it was good. I mean, I just didn't. I mean, I was just there as the Zoom host, but it was some great conversations. On ongoing projects. So to kind of piggyback off the conversation we just had on Capital, we had a great session today with Secretary Vega of the Communities and Programs Division at the state and some of the staff about MassWorks. Now, we did not win the MassWorks grant, unfortunately, but they gave us a debriefing, and we had a great session. And Senator O'Connor took part on Zoom, and I think it was a great opportunity to learn what we could do. You know, again, there was a lot of favorable comments. The application really was well received. That said, there were 100 applications, and they only were able to fund 36 of them. So they were particularly impressed on how we hit some key aspects. They were impressed with the town's planning, master planning, all of the housing planning, and they recognized that, you know, a community like us, Cohasset, putting up 20 units is like Boston putting up 300, right? So they understand that there's a size differential. So I think we came out of it very positively, and they're going to start a new streamlined process to kind of do this kind of consultation before the process, and that's going to. So we're one of the first communities to learn about that. That's going to be starting very soon. So we're going to jump in, and they'll review up to 5 potential projects, and then tell you how, out of the scope of 10 grant programs, where you might fit in best. So that process, we're ready to jump right into that pretty soon. So Lauren, Lynn was on the call, Brian Joyce, Federico, myself, and Michelle Leary. So we had a really good, you know, I think we're ready to keep going on that. And we're, you know, we'll see what happens at the federal level, right? There's some possibility now that there might be an infrastructure bill at some point. And if that's the case, have some projects that are teed up that were already in the pipeline, you know, we might be able to get more favorably received. So, you know, and we have several, you know, apart from that, you know, the sewer project up there, there's Elm Street, and there's this building, the town hall building, and a number of other things. So there's a real opportunity, I think, for us to continue to partner with the state and maybe get some grant dollars. So that's also ongoing. And I think I mentioned this. So town hall is now officially again closed to the public, I'm afraid. We've been working kind of on a limited basis because of these spiking cases. We're just got to be careful. So we're still servicing people on phone, by email. People need to come in and drop stuff off. We can interact through the glass and even outside if we need to. So people have been, and that's been noticed everywhere. So I think, and again, there haven't been a lot of people coming in anyway, quite frankly. And we still have staff in the field. People are still doing inspections. All those things are still happening. People are staffing the departments, and a lot of people have kind of pivoted to, you know, Dropbox. We have a much bigger Dropbox now thanks to the election, so we have a lot more space for stuff. And I think people have pivoted nicely to online. The other thing I need to mention, I'm glad I just was reminded of. So Carol St. Pierre wanted me to let you know that there's been a little delay in the dog license process has started. That said, unfortunately, the tags themselves are delayed. So the company that makes them in the town has partnered with the county on this, has been delayed in producing them. So we're taking registrations, and they will go out once they come in, but the actual tags themselves are delayed. So just want everyone to know that it's not that they're going slow here. It's just that the physical tags are you know, been a little delayed in production. So it's not just us. Every community that partners, there's a lot of them on this are in the same boat. So please.
Chris, is that an annual thing?
Yeah, it's an annual. We're in the renewal process. So the renewal notices go out with the census, and that's going out now. So please just be patient. I know some people jump ahead because you can do that online separately. So the tags will go when they come in. So we're hoping that's fairly soon. I just want to let everybody know that. So it's not that the clerk is sitting on this. It's just that there's literally a production problem with the tags.
Great.
You know, that's a quick update.
Okay. Select board comments. Jack.
Well, Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, good. I want everybody to know that on February 1st, we have it on the agenda to start moving finally towards our long-awaited youth center. And, you know, as everybody remembers, I think we, or at least I promised that by summer and COVID, we will have that open. And I think I want to thank all the people in the town who've worked on it and people around town who've made calls and talked about it. Keep it up. Be wonderful to have that youth center open, and it will be something that we owe our kids and we owe our hardworking parents as well. So that's a bit of good news for the new year. Thank you.
Corey.
We made it to 2021, thankfully very much, but that means that the calendar of stuff is moving fast. And I just want to let everybody know that if you're thinking about running, being elected to a town board, any of these elected boards, including our board or a sewer commission, those types of positions, paperwork typically needs to be filed in the beginning of March. So, you know, think about that in your month and a half. And if you'd like to step forward, be sure you don't miss the deadline.
Just to piggyback on that, Chris, it would be great, given the fact that we just set the election dates at our last meeting, if we could get a memo out soon regarding, you know, availability of papers and when papers need to be submitted, because especially
Absolutely.
as we're out there trying to shake people down to, you know, get on the boards and committees that are opening, they, you know, if they knew that there was an opening on the Board of Health or the Select Board or whatever forthcoming, they, you know, they might choose otherwise. So it would be great to have that information out to the public as soon as possible. Great. Paul.
A couple quick things. I want to thank the town for, you know, this is very difficult last year with the pandemic. Done a great job. We knew we were going to see numbers rise in Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. I would ask that, you know, we've got a few more months of the surge. If we can get through it, it'd be great. And I just want to thank the support from the town. It's been a very tough year, but it's a brand new year and things are looking up. The other comment I want to make is I'm an old Yankee from way back. I wore my Union blue. Out in front of my house is a Union flag from the Civil War, and I just want to balance that with what I saw in the Capitol in front of a U.S. Senator Sumner, who was beaten on the floor of the Senate, trying to prevent the insurrection at the time. And to see a Southern rebel flag in front of his portrait, as someone who walked by that portrait numerous times, I was horrified. So I'm going to leave up the Union flag up for a few more months, I think, because I'm an old Union guy. And I'm glad that we certified the election. That's it.
Carrie.
Well said, Paul. I have a lot of thoughts, but I think that my biggest concern right now is that I'm very worried about government at all levels. And the reason that this country is functioning right now, in my opinion, is because of local government and all of the hard workers and municipal employees and first responders in our town and every town that have been working so hard, especially dealing with this pandemic the past year. So I know everyone probably watching at this hour at this point is already involved and we're preaching to the choir. But first of all, if you see a town employee, if you talk to a first responder, just thank them. This has been a really exhausting year. And I feel like heading into winter, it's just getting a lot more soul sucking. And Cohasset is functioning, in my opinion, fairly well because we have such a good staff, because we have such great employees. We have great first responders. We have great board members and elected officials. And we need more people to get involved, though. I am a little concerned about some of the resignations we've seen on our boards and committees. I'm a little concerned about how many people are going to be on the ballot for our upcoming election just because of what's going on and how busy things are and how stressful things are. And the way that we keep functioning good as a town is because of citizen involvement. So ask a friend to run, reach out to someone that you've seen on social media that seems interesting, that seems smart, ask them to run for office, ask them to consider being on a board. We have to keep helping all of our staff and employees to keep Cohasset functioning. So I echo what everyone else said, but let's step it up heading into election day.
She took the words right out of my mouth, so I'll spare you, but everything Carrie just said. Thank you all. The only other small thing, just to clarify, Jack, we are going to talk, February 1st is not a select board meeting, but hopefully at our first meeting in February, we will do a deep dive on the details for a teen center, which Chris said is moving along toward that end, to have that discussion about what it would look like and how we can make it happen. I also want to just note, because again, a lot of the phone calls I've been getting that aren't COVID related or vaccine related are about coyotes. And I've gotten a couple of text messages as we're sitting here about coyotes. The police chief brought in some wildlife experts and our ACO, I think it was last Tuesday, is that right? And they did a Zoom program about coyotes and how, to what extent we can address them and how to, handle a situation if you encounter it. They're out there. There's a lot of them. Really keep your small pets with you at all times, because there's not a whole lot we can do in the short term, but that video was recorded. I believe it was on Zoom, and I think it can be found on the police department's Facebook page, or certainly looking at the various websites of the town. So I encourage people to listen to that if they have concerns about those scary things in their backyard. Other than that, I have nothing. Again, thanks to everybody for your hard work and hanging in there during this difficult time at all levels. And I'll ask for an approval of minutes. We have 4 sets of minutes from November and December.
Point of order, could we approve them all at once this time, or do we want to do them individually?
I don't have a preference. It's really up to those of you. Unless somebody has a change.
I have no objections to the minutes myself.
Okay.
All right, I move to approve the minutes from the following dates: from November 10th, 2020, November 17th, 2020, December 10th, 2020, and December 15th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Jack Creighton is town clerk until such time as we are permanently archiving the electronic copies. I don't think that we're doing our job, so I vote nay.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Okay, great.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Sorry, Carrie. I forgot you. All right, so those minutes are approved. We have one outstanding set of public session minutes from September, which have been clarified. Those will be out in the next packet, and we should be caught up per the next meeting goal that Attorney Durensis discussed with us earlier. Okay, so we do need to quickly adjourn our public session, and then we're going to go quickly into an executive session. Is that all right with everybody still? Chris? Okay, and
Good.
we will adjourn the full meeting at the end of the executive session. So a motion to adjourn the public session. Oh, sorry. You know what? We need a motion to go back into executive session. I'm sorry about that. So I'm looking for a motion to go into executive session for exemption number 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. The board will discuss the finance director contract. Also, under exception 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, and if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. I do declare. The board will discuss police union contracts. We anticipate this will be no more than 20 minutes, at which time we'll adjourn the full meeting for the evening.
So moved with the exit of the executive session for full exiting of the original meeting,
Public meeting, great.
public meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Okay, we're gonna go to the other link and we'll see you there shortly and we will be expeditious, I promise. Thank you
If
all.
anyone has any trouble getting in, just give a call. Tracy is at her desk to help. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.